Shalom to all. This week's Parsha is a very, very special Parsha. I guess there are. The Parsha of Trumah. It's actually begins a series of 5 Parshiot that talks about the tabernacle, the Mishkan that was in the desert. And that is the basis for the temples that came afterwards. First, the second, and please God, the future third temple. And I have an idea that developed 30 years ago or so. Actually 20 years ago, that I still like, and I want to share it with you. I think it shows that the values, the symbolic, the symbolism of things in the temple are very, very important, and they're not just coincidental. It looks like a lot of details, a lot of repetition, and it's hard to understand why the Torah spent so much time talking about all these details. But here we'll just look at one example of the details of the vessels and the placement and the mentioning in the Torah in the next 2 Parshiot, and what we can learn from them, which is, I think, a very deep idea. And from this, we can appreciate that there's a lot to be learned in all the other details, the measurements and the order of things and everything to do with the temple, with the tabernacle, and with all the details. So I'm going to share a schematic that I prepared to get the point across. And here you can see a schematic, a bird's eye view of the Mishkan, divided into 3 parts: the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy. Okay, these 2 parts in the temple were actually covered with a roof. And then the Azara, which I translated as the courtyard. I'm not sure what the appropriate word is over there. And the Azara is the place where the temple was, where the altar was, where actually the Mezbech, where they actually used to burn the animals and sprinkle the blood. I've indicated also the directions. This is north, west, southeast. And obviously, as we go in closer, you're getting more holier. This is the most outer part and the most revealed part. Okay, as I said, there's no roof here, so the tabernacle could be seen on a mountain alongside, even by somebody who wasn't Jewish, somebody who wasn't pure. Anybody could see the tabernacle. Men, women, Israelites were all allowed into this section if they were pure. This section, only the Kohanim were present, although there's a thin strip over here, which I haven't shown, where the Leviim could go also, the Levites. And here in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, only the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, went in once a year on Yom Kippur for a few minutes, 3 times, just to do the work that he had to do there, the service. Now, the interesting thing is that this week's Parsha talks about the Trumah. And the word Trumah translates as donation, but the beauty of the Hebrew language is that it also means l'harim, from the word rum, terumah. When you give a donation, you're actually lifting it up, you're making it more holy, you're giving it more significance. And often talks about the generalizing the different types of donations that you can give, gold and silver and different types of wool. It goes on to explain the vessels, and I've copied pictures here of the main vessels, the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, and the table where the bread was, the menorah, the small altar where they used to burn incense, and the big altar where I said earlier they used to burn the parts of the sacrifice and also sprinkle the blood. Now, the interesting thing that the Torah starts in a very systematic order. First, it just gives a detailed description about the Aron Kodesh. In the Holy of Holies, he had the Aron. It was 3 boxes, 2 of gold and 1 of wood in the middle. And it had this covering, the kaporet on top, and these 2 figures in the shape of 2 baby faces with the wings facing each other. On top of it. And then the Torah goes on and describes the next vessel, which, going out in systematic order, it describes the table, the Aron HaKodesh, the shulchan. And on the table, there were 12 special loaves of bread, shaped like a U shape, a wide U shape. And they were changed every Shabbat, and they stayed fresh for the whole week, which was one of the miracles of the temple. And then thereafter, again moving in order, the Torah describes the vessel that's just opposite, and that's the menorah that provided light, spiritual light, maybe some physical light. It was lit every afternoon by the Kohen Gadol. And then the Torah moves on to describe the big altar outside. And we seem to have forgotten something. What about the little altar over here? The Torah goes on then to describe that on top of each of these sections, on top of the whole tabernacle, there were skins of animals or different coverings. There were 4 different coverings. The first was a covering made of different kinds of wools and threads. The other 3 were different kinds of animal coverings. And then it goes on to describe what these walls were made of. They were made of poles of cedar wood, very big poles of cedar wood, 5 meters high and 3/4 of a meter wide, and how they're all linked together. A lot of details. And then describes what there was in the courtyard outside the structure and how it stood. Describes the curtain that divided between these 2 parts, and the masach, another type of curtain that came between the entrance to the altar. And that's the end of this week's parsha. And then we ask ourselves, wait a second, it's quite obvious that you can see that there's something missing over here. What about this altar? What about the small altar? So in next week's parsha talks about the special clothing that the Kohanim used, and some of the activities, the worship that was done in order to initiate the temple. And then right at the end of next week's parsha, it suddenly remembers to mention this altar that, so to speak, seems to have been forgotten. And it's a blaring question. A lot of the commentators ask this question: what happened to this altar over here? And in order to give an answer to this question, there are several answers given. And this answer I thought of at my oldest daughter's bat mitzvah 22 years ago. And I still like the answer, and I have seen it in fact mentioned by some commentators subsequently. If you look at the altar, at the whole tabernacle, you can see without this altar, you must have a cross shape. We have the 2 directions, the 2 dimensions, which are 4 directions, right? You have the east-west dimension, and the north-south dimension. And in each case, we have 2 opposites. Let me explain what I mean. If you look at the west-east, on the west we have the altar, the Aron Kodesh, which was the holiest thing in the tabernacle. The Kohen Gadol only saw it once a year. It had the 10 commandments inside. It even had the broken 10 commandments that Moshe broke inside of it as well. Only the Kohen Gadol saw it once a year for a few minutes. And the voice of God, the prophecy of God, used to come between these wings of these churuvim, of these 2 shapes, and come out to the prophets. Something very spiritual, very withdrawn from anything in the physical world. And then on the other extreme, on the eastern extreme, we have the altar, which by standards of the temple was probably the most physical vessel in the tabernacle. As we said, it could be seen even by people who were not pure. They used to burn behemoths, right? They used to burn animals on top of this altar and sprinkle the blood on the side of the altar, or sometimes on the corners of the altar, depending on the type of sacrifice. And you see really two different extremes. In a similar fashion, even here within the holies, you see two different extremes. On the northern end, you have the bread, which symbolizes parnasa, symbolizes sustenance. People need to eat bread. And in fact, the bread that we eat used to get blessed from the service of the bread that came in the temple. And on the southern end, you have the light. The light is a spirituality. And again, normally, these are two opposites. These are seen as two opposites. And if somebody is emphasizing life in spirituality and wisdom, he's symbolized by the menorah, by the light. In fact, the Gemara says, there's a siman, there's a sign, how you remember which of these is in the south and which is in the north. And the sign is, Harotzeh lehachkim yadrim. If somebody wants to be wise, he should go to the south. If somebody wants to be rich, Harotzeh lahashir yatzpin, he should go to the north. And so the wealth, the sustenance is in the north, and the light is in the south. And again, you see these two opposites. So if this vessel in the middle did not exist, let's take it away for a second. And what we would see a lot of extremes. We see that on this extreme, we have something very spiritual, very uplifting, very way separated from the earth. And in this extreme, we have something that's very earthly, very down to earth. Here we have something that within man is looking for sustenance, looking for physical strength. And here we have something within man that's looking for the spiritual side. And in fact, in this world, they call it the tabernacle, a small world. We see lots and lots of different forces. And we think, look at all the different forces in the world. There's the sun, there's the cold winds, there's water, there's everything seems to be pulling in a different direction. There's animals, there's inanimate objects, there's plants, there's people, and you may think that this comes from a lot of different forces. Comes the missing vessel, one in the middle that we just mentioned now, and this is the Mizbach HaKtoret, the altar of the incense in the middle, and ties it all together. How does it tie it all together? Because incense has a pleasant smell from something that you burn. It looks spiritual, but actually if you look with the microscope or even with the magnifying glass, you'll see little particles over there. It sort of links between the spiritual and the physical. And in fact, the word in Hebrew for ketoret, for incense, ketoret is from the Aramaic word kesher, to bring things together. And this is why I believe the Torah decided to describe this vessel not in the systematic order going from the Kodesh out, and sort of skipped over this vessel, because this vessel has a special purpose. It has the purpose, probably the most important purpose of all the others, to bring everything together, to make us realize that the physical and the spiritual are not from different sources and don't have different purposes. They're all there to achieve the same purpose. The physical is to serve the spiritual. We earn money, we go to work in order to have strength to build up our families, to educate our children, to learn Torah, to become better people, to become more moral people. And it's not different forces. And it all came from one Hashem, one God, one source. And what we see, what appears to be all different forces, whether it's the north and the south or the west and the east, they're actually different aspects of the one infinite God. And that's why the Torah chose that to keep this right at the end of all the descriptions of these two Parshiot, to tell us that everything, all the details of the Mishkan, including these vessels, including the canvas that came on top, the roofs, including the logs on the side that held up the temple, that were the walls, including the curtains, including the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, including the avodah, the worship that they did themselves. All this is part of one source. Hashem is one. And therefore, it came at the end to bring it together. We actually say some of the Nusach Sfarad and the Sfaradim have a minhag that just before Shabbat comes in, we say a little part of the Zohar that talks about the unity, that on Shabbat one can see the unity. During the week, everybody is doing their own thing. You may be an accountant, you may be a lawyer, you may be a bricklayer, and you may be a garbage removal person. But on Shabbat, everybody puts on the same simple white clothes and comes to the same shul. Please God, we'll go back to shul soon. And you can't tell the difference between a neurosurgeon and a toilet cleaner. We're all sitting there and we all become one. That is the unity of Shabbat, and that is the unity of the Mishkan. And if we realize this oneness, we realize what God is, that the single source created the whole world. Yeh Ratzon may be Hashem's will and all of our will, that we were able to work together and realize the oneness, bring us together as a people, the Jewish people, the people of the world, to just make this world a better place, learning from the lessons of the Mishkan. Thank you and Shabbat Shalom.